All right, well, I think it's 9 o'clock, so we can go ahead and get started. And I wanted to start by welcoming everybody to today's conversation about community colleges and universities and the partnership between those entities and the public workforce system. And my name is Tracey Carey. I'm the Executive Director of Midwest Urban Strategies. And we have been hosting a series of what we have coined Zoominars. These are intended to be conversational. So if you have comments or questions as we move into the session here, please feel free to put them into the chat. For now, you will be muted just to manage the conversation process so we can hear from the folks who are here to share their experiences and have a conversation. But there will be time at the end for question and answer. And so if you want to post up your questions in the chat section, Amber will be keeping track of those questions as we go, and we'll make sure to leave ample time at the end to return to those questions and have a bit of a conversation. The point here is to create sort of a kitchen table conversation. So we want to make sure that folks have the opportunity to have some dialogue around the issues that are important to us. And so we're excited to have you here. So we'll get started, and I will do a brief round of introductions. So we have with us today Tamar Jacoby, and Tamar is with Opportunity America, and they just finished up I think a year-long study and working paper on much of the topics that we'll have the chance to begin diving into today. So Tamar, do you want to give a bit of an introduction?
Thank you, Tracey. It's great to be here. I'm the president of a policy and research shop in Washington, D.C., Opportunity America, and we do focus largely on workforce issues with a little bit more of a focus on the community college side than the workforce system side, although we do both. And the paper that Tracey's talking about, I spent a year with not just me, but a working group of people, high-level higher ed education reformers and community college educators, trying to reimagine community colleges and what could they do better, how could they serve America better in this moment where workforce is really so important, before COVID and all the more after COVID. And one of our principal recommendations was better cooperation between community colleges and the workforce system. So I think that's why I'm here today, why I'm your moderator.
Absolutely. So as Tamara just said, she will be moderating the conversation here. And we've framed up a series of questions that we will create a dialogue around. And joining us in that dialogue is Steve Partridge. And Steve, you are currently the Director of Workforce Development at the Virginia Community College. Do I have that right? I'm sorry, I don't have my...
Well, we're part of a system. So Northern Virginia Community College is part of the Virginia Community College system. So you've got that right.
Got it. Thanks. So can you tell us a little bit about your history? Because I think you come to this conversation with both the community college experience as well as the public workforce system experience, which gives you an interesting vantage point to speak from.
Yes, so I've previously I've been at NOVA almost 5 years now in my current role, and before that I ran the local workforce board in Charlotte, North Carolina called Charlotte Works for 6 years. And prior to that, I was in the economic development field, but was also the executive director of the state workforce board in Arizona. So I've had both the state board, local board, economic development, and now community college.
Great. So excited to hear the conversation that we'll have here and some of the experiences that you've had, as well as those of Clyde McQueen, who is the president and CEO of Full Employment Council, which is the workforce development board representative in Kansas City and the surrounding area. So Clyde, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience in the field?
Yeah, so I was in economic development. I was an industrial development consultant for about 6 years. And then I was the state workforce director in Texas for 4 years. And then I chaired our local economic development agency in Kansas City for about 5 years. And then I've been the local workforce director for 2 workforce boards for the last gosh, 30 years. So I started off as a summer youth participant in these programs, so, yeah, and so we have a very strong relationships with our community college, and but also we kind of also undergone some of the systemic interface issues, and so I'm glad that we're having this conversation today.
And so I think, with all of our participants, you guys all started when you were about 8 years old. And so, that explains the long tenure, right? So without any further ado, I want to kind of dive in because we have a lot to talk about and unpack here. So Tamar, I'm going to hand the reins over to you. And I look forward to a great conversation. Remember to post your questions in chat and we'll be moderating.
So thank you, Tracey, and thank you everyone who's joining us by Zoom. I feel a sense of real trust because I'm a stranger, I'm a newcomer, and you're trusting me to moderate a conversation on, what, let's admit, is a essential but a little bit sensitive question, right? So I'm really looking forward to a lively conversation between Steve and Clyde, but we want more than a Q&A at the end. We really want all of you to come into the conversation because your experience and your point of view on this is as important as anyone on the panels. So please, get ready to weigh in. Everyone tells me you're not going to be shy, so I'm counting on that. So let me just frame it for a moment before I start asking questions. I'm going to run this a little bit like a talk show host. So let me just frame it for a moment before I do my talk show thing. If you were from Mars and you landed on Earth and you looked at the situation with the community college system network and the public workforce system, you would really say, as the kids say, SMH, like shaking my head, like what is going on here? We have two vast taxpayer funded systems that exist side by side, often in the same geography, with very closely aligned, if not identical, certainly overlapping, if not identical, purposes, serving many of the same people, competing for many of the same employers. And there are differences, obviously, that get in the way of closer cooperation, different funding streams, different metrics. But the upshot is that the two systems in so many places are more competitive than cooperative. And you can pick your metaphor, community colleges are from Mars, workforce boards are from Venus. Frenemies is a word that I hear a lot in these conversations. Competitors, rivals, you name it. And the question really for today is, we want to air that. We want to get that problem on the table because we don't just want, it doesn't really pay. We're not going to solve it if we just pretend, oh, we all get along fine and there's nothing to fix. We want to kind of air what the problem is, but then we want to think about, can we do better? Can we fix this? Can both sides play a part in creating a more cooperative and effective system? I mean, after all, we're all in this because we're trying to serve similar people. Let's get our act together so that we can deliver better results for the people who need the help and for employers. So, we know that won't be easy. We got turf battles, we got mistrust, we got a siloed system that doesn't make it easy. But that's what we want to talk about today is what's the problem and how do we get to a better place? And we'll talk about it here on the panel, but then we really do want your input. So let's start with diagnosis, you guys. Like what is wrong? And I hope you're both going to be kind of unvarnished here. Like, first of all, what is the conventional wisdom on your side of the, and Steve, I'm putting you're going to represent community colleges for the moment. Although later you'll maybe help us bridge. What's the conventional wisdom of the relationship on your side of the aisle, at its worst? And what are the metaphors and what are the metaphors and what are the legit concerns? So let's start with you, Steve, and then we'll go to you, Clyde. And feel like you're representing community colleges. So tell us what the vibe is.
Yeah, this is a hard one because I kind of see both sides here. And from the community college, I know in talking to my peers, they're always somewhat frustrated with workforce boards because we want to be seen as the provider of choice. So if you look at sort of the ETPL list, you see lots of companies on there, lots of money going out from workforce boards. And sometimes my peers are sort of dumbfounded that, like, why aren't we getting more market share? Why aren't they sending more students to us? because we already get taxpayer funding, so we often have the infrastructure built out. So why would you want to send someone to a competitor, so to speak? And it gets into that element of choice, the consumer choice, where someone comes into a one-stop and they say, I want to go back to school, I want to get training in IT or maybe healthcare. And yes, the community college offers that, but maybe I don't have the view of the community college as maybe the best at it. I mean, that's some challenge we have in the community college system, is often seen as less than. Often the community college has a chip on its shoulder a little coming into this, where they feel like they have to prove themselves all the time. And with the workforce boards, obviously there's a lot of money that passes through the board structure for vouchers, and we want to make sure that we get our fair share. That creates some dynamic and tension. I think sometimes in urban markets, it's less of an issue than in rural markets, where maybe more of that money, there's a feeling that we're the big guy in town, we should get more of that, where maybe in Northern Virginia, there's so many training providers, there's so much money out there coming into training that the workforce board represents a small piece of that puzzle for us, so we don't put as much emphasis on it in an urban market.
So that's the worst you can say? I mean, I'm kidding here, but imagine this is Fox TV. Like, I mean, and take off maybe your nice hat for a minute and put on, the hat of somebody. And I'm going to do the same with Clyde. What's the worst that when community college people get together among themselves, what do they say about the workforce board?
Well, I mean, I don't think I'll just add that I think, there's a nice hat, but I don't think it's really, I think both sides understand that neither is funded adequately in this country. I mean, that's part of the challenge in all this, is it's not like the workforce board are sitting on a ton of cash that they get from the Congress and we're starving and vice versa. It is an underfunded system that I think we have to come together. And I think both sides realize we need each other more than, that's why the frenemies comment, I think, really resonates.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, Clyde, up to you. And you can say all the nasty things people say when they get together, and then also the legit concerns.
Well, I think behind the doors, I think the questions that come up about the community colleges is, number one, the schedule, because most of the schedules of community colleges tend to be semester based, when we are being pushed by the Department of Labor to get so many credentials out on a yearly basis. How many credentials do you have? How many people have you had complete the system? How many credentials have you issued during the system? And then if we don't, everybody in the world gets our write-up. The mayor gets it, the board gets it, because we aren't getting enough credentials out, but we don't have any control over that, right? And so our challenge becomes, in order for us not to get put on blast, we have to go to every other training institution to make sure that we meet the mandate to get out more credentials, to get them out quicker, to get them, for us to be much more in tune with the private sector. And that just runs directly in conflict with the calendar of semester-based coursework. I think that's the biggest issue, because what I think the community colleges have, they are very fortunate, and that they have monitoring reports being given to their chancellors and their board presidents every quarter, the way boards do, and for that, I think that's what's really driving that the regulatory framework is much more. Just think about it. This workforce system since 1980 has had reauthorization legislation 3 times. That's every 15 years. That's a lot of change. And with that, changes in performance standards. Consequently, our community college presidents, they don't have systems, don't have that much dramatic change, and people saying, you need to be fixed every 15 years. And so consequently,
they could use a little more dramatic change.
Yeah. And not to count what happens when you have gubernatorial change, when you have Department of Labor secretary changes so I think that's the biggest issue.
That's really interesting.
So,
I didn't hear the gripe I sometimes hear, which is that, the community colleges just have their hand out. They think we're the ATM. Is that not a real gripe?
Well, I think to a certain extent that may be the case with some, but I know for example, our community college president, when President Obama first came up with this just-in-time training center that they did. Great thing. But that was a one-time deal. The stars lined up just right. The zodiacs were all pointing in the same direction. But that's such a rare moment And I think that as persons try to get this fixed, there are a lot of things that the regulatory framework, the calendar, that are beyond our control. And I think that increasingly is more the concern than we do everybody's got their hand out. I don't think that's as much of an issue now as much as it is the systems alignment of both systems.
So I just have a factual question about that, and then I'm going to move on to a next question for both of you. But what about the non-credit division? Doesn't that get you out of the calendar bind?
Well, the challenge with the non-credit division is you got to make sure the non-credit division lines up with the demand of the employers. And so sometimes the non-credit divisions, though they are there and they are very spontaneous, the employer demand side of it does not necessarily reinforce the placement nor retention requirements that they are seeking. And I think that that's one of the challenges with non-credit. Now, I can tell you that most of our courses are non-credit. If they were credited, we'd be using Pell Grants, right? But guess what? The Pell Grant system does not lend itself to a just-in-time or market-driven system, which unfortunately is what's driven the community college because it's been the biggest source of funding. Yeah. So Pell Grants are this big, and WIOA is this big. Well, if you're the community college, what you going to do? You're going to go after this, you know? And I think that that's kind of the other dynamic that's driving, I would say, the system incompatibility between the two.
Yeah, that's my day job, is trying to get workforce Pell. But Steve, go for it, and then I'm going to change the topic.
No, I just want to reinforce something Clyde said. You know, when I was in the workforce system and I was the executive director, you almost went to bed every night going, you know, every week you're going to be challenged, like, why do you exist? And now at the community colleges, I don't get that. I mean, people just, it's like, oh, community colleges exist. They've always existed. They should be here in perpetuity. That sort of gets you resting a little on your laurels about like, oh, we're really great. And so it doesn't sort of ignite that sort of, we always have to be, you know, changing, investing in ourselves, rethinking, because you're right. I mean, 3 reauthorizations in the past couple decades is a lot, where we just sort of when I got to Nova, we go out, we put our catalog out in the non-credit space. And this is what we have. It was not tied to labor market at all. It was just whatever we thought we had built that we thought would sell, we were pushing. That's different now, because that was sort of the reason I went to the community college side. Is I always had the money and never the training to back up the money. And I wanted to kind of learn, how do you do this on the other side? And can you make it a little more robust to what businesses and workforce boards need? But it is still that mindset a lot of times where we just put out that catalog, and once we build it, it's a cash cow, regardless if there's demand or not.
So, you know, on my side, you know, again, I live in the world in the bubble in DC, you know, with legislators and that kind of thing. We think like that you can't make enough change in the workforce system or the community college system. But now this is helpful, because now I have a little perspective. Change is disruptive. Okay, so let's switch gears from the diagnosis to, let's pretend you guys, each of you were czar, or, you know, workforce king or whatever. What would your ideal situation look like? So, you know, and I'm going to start this time, I'm going to start with you, Clyde. You know, what is it? Cooperation? Is it some kind of integration? Is it, you know, what would work better? We've got these two systems. How do we get over this duplicative, expensive, you know, situation? What's the, and be bold, you know, and I hope both your answers are different, because then we'll have two visions.
Well, I see the community college having a just-in-time training unit or section, and I see them having the ongoing traditional approach that they use, because that meets the needs of the market. For some, the market needs to be to traditional 2-year extended semester basis. That is appropriate for healthcare. That's appropriate for biosciences. That is appropriate for that. For the more interim, what I call quick-based thing, which might be tied to IT, might be tied to some more credential-based employment approaches, I think a just-in-time training center is appropriate. At our community college, when the President Obama first came up with this stimulus program, she created that just for that purpose. Our chancellor did, who was the chancellor at that time, and that worked great. And I think that we should have those things aligning appropriately in that way. That's number one. That's industry informed. Number two, there has to be alignment And I think this is not just with the workforce system, but in our region, in our state, the adjunct faculty requirements are different for community colleges and four-year institutions. And in that case, I'd rather go with a 4-year because they get adjunct faculty. In fact, that's driven me more to four-year institutions because I can get industry experts to teach in a university system much more than I can in a community college system.
Oh, wow.
And that's got to change.
That's crazy.
That is, yeah, well, that's the case. There are two different sets of criteria, at least in our particular state, that ties to that. And then I would say, thirdly, that there be a systematic interface where both the community college system and the workforce system sit down with our industry clusters in the same room, so that they can understand that, and we don't have two different conversations. One, I sit on the board of the Chamber of Commerce. I sit on the board of the Economic Development Corporation. And the one thing that they complain about is the redundancy of conversations that they have about training. And at least if we could do that, then we wouldn't look so crazy to people who have to interface with both of our systems. Because at the end of the day, everybody sees us as doing the same thing. Whether we think we are or not, the general public, our customers, quote unquote, whether they are employers or even to some extent people, still see us as one and the same. They don't make this real clear distinction between, oh, you're on the campus and you're on the block, or you're on the block and not on the campus. So I think, and those are things that we can do without regulatory reform. If we did that, then I think we could have a much better impact on Pell Grant change, which I think everybody knows we need. I think we'd have a much bigger impact on aligning the state systems for adjunct faculty, which I think we would need. And I think we can be able to better align our performance metrics, which quite frankly drive a lot of the conversation. I mean, when you've got somebody saying, how many credentials did you push out? If you don't push out enough or you don't get enough placements, you're a screwball, you're a bunch of screwballs, you're inadequate, right? And then you see directly across the street from you, credentials coming out like this, but they aren't necessarily been able to go place in the workforce as we need them. I think some of that is changing, but it is not changing as rapidly because you know what? We're at the end of WIOA. We're going to be up for another reauthorization. So guess what? And next year or two, we're going to get hit again. And everybody's going to talk about, and then the regulatory framework changes, and everybody's going to talk about, God, those guys are a bunch of bureaucrats. I think that's what really girds us, you know, that is not us sitting up in here creating all these magnanimous regulations that talk about all these things that we got to hire 3 staff to try to make compliance, but that it's being driven not by the market, but by the regulatory framework that governs us.
Yeah, I mean, I'm resonating back. There's a few things that you said that resonate. I mean, one is the competition for the employers. I mean, how many rubber chicken dinners have we all been to where there's literally like one employer at the table and the community college guy on one side and the workforce guy on the other side, and they're like the employer has whiplash.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's, you know, but I mean, I'm struck by how in a way both systems kind of have a chip on their shoulder. I mean, I don't think I'd sort of understood this till I sort of heard you both talk. You know, you both sort of think, you know, am I, you know, so, and that maybe that is part of what makes it hard to overcome the gulf, because you sort of both have a little bit of chip on your shoulder, and I don't know, it's just a perception. Steve, so but Clyde, let me just push you a little more. So you're going to keep both systems. You're going to keep separate funding streams. You're going to basically just have better communication and better cooperation. Is that fair to say?
Well, I think one thing that is happening, the feds are pushing us to allocate more money to training. So you don't have these huge staff bureaucracies, all these different buildings. We are co-located in one of our career centers on the community college campus. When we get the chance, especially with COVID, we've gone to a virtual framework. So we're trying to reduce our physical office footprint, but we still want to try to make ourselves be accessible. Yeah. So we've had to negotiate our business model differently with reduced rents and things like that. So I think just by nature of the market, we're having to reduce the redundancies of buildings and staffing, et cetera. And I think at the same time where we are going to community college campuses, to increase the ability to facilitate training more easily. At the same time, community colleges need to look at how could they convene some coursework on workforce center operations, so that it doesn't mean you have to always go to a campus, because in those instances, some of our clients, campus is not readily available.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes there's an arrogance that assumes that campus is the only place for it to happen.
Yeah.
And I've seen that within some of our educational partners. Well, if y'all don't want to come here, too bad, well, it ain't about you, it's about the people,
Yeah,
and
fair
so
enough, fair
sometimes I
enough.
think that's what happens. That's it.
Okay, but so the ideas we have on the table, we have common metrics, and I'm going to come to you, Steve, in a sec. Common metrics, we have common, we have co-location, we have one portal for employers. What about, well, okay, let's Steve, let me come to you. What's your vision?
Yeah, I'll build on what Clyde said. I think, the infrastructure is a big cost for both systems, and both systems are not getting a lot of money added to them. So that infrastructure cost becomes a larger and larger percentage of everyone's budget to maintain it, whether that's rent, whether that's employees. And I think we need to re-envision that piece, because as we all know, as Congress wants more and more people trained, and you've got this overhead, there's fewer and fewer dollars to train people as a percent of your budget. So I think looking at co-location is at a minimum. That makes sense. And I think we learned a lot in COVID. I think we made a lot of assumptions about our clients and our students that, oh no, they want to come and meet in person. Students want to drive across Northern Virginia 2 hours to get to our campus. That's the fun of it. And we learned that actually in COVID, there's a lot of decreased enrollment at community colleges. Ours went up because I think all of a sudden it became easy for students to take classes where before it was a drive. And so re-envisioning how we deliver our services was always sort of that innovative piece of WIOA and in the community college system that we want to get to, but we're so married to our infrastructure because of mandates, because of partnerships. So re-envisioning that piece is critical. But I think at the end of the day, WIOA sort of put an emphasis less on the one stop and more about being this system builder. But we didn't fund it that way, but that was the intent. It was sort of saying, you're going to bring the business community together. You're going to figure out from an economic development strategy, how do you have the talent ready to go in your community to really grow your economy? And again, you're not funded for that, but that's also where I think some of the best community colleges are also putting dollars. We didn't have in Charlotte, I had a data shop. I had a person that ran the labor market data, so I could actually make sure that the ETPL list was aligned with what the jobs were. We didn't have that in Northern Virginia. Our workforce boards didn't invest in that. So we did at the community college, and I've got a team of 3 that do nothing, and we share that data with the workforce board. We actually put their logos on it, like it came out from them, so that the community sees that we're all aligned. So I think if you look at data, you look at infrastructure, and you look at the piece Clyde mentioned is the businesses. The businesses don't want to have 50 meetings. They want to have one meeting and everyone in the room to hear what they want. And so if you can start to align some of these things, I think you start to build a system. Doesn't mean it's going to look the same in every community. Maybe in some communities, the workforce board's the lead on a lot of this. In others, it's the community college. Maybe in some communities, the Chamber of Commerce. There are different organizations that we all inherit in our communities that have different strengths and weaknesses. And I think you have to build that system understanding that. And if you just mandate that the workforce board is in charge, the community college is in charge of every community, that's where it's set up for failure, because our communities are not all the same.
So you're going further, you're really the data and this idea of kind of coming together as almost council or something, one coalition to plan the economic development of the region or to drive the economic development of the region. That's a step further than you, Clyde. Is that right? I'm hearing almost, Steve's almost verging on not quite merge, but much closer integration.
Yeah.
What's your reaction to that?
I think that's true, but I do think also that there is one distinction, a very big signal that the government is sending that is very implicit. And I say that in terms of vocational schools, proprietary schools, community colleges. We got all these people coming at us. They're all funded by the Department of Education, right? There's the vocational CTE system. There are the private proprietary systems, all of whom have interface with the Department of Labor. And then we got the ETPL list that says that basically in our state, the Department of Education, U.S. Department of State, Missouri Department, and Workforce is in the same department. That just happened a year ago, right? Well, we got this ETPL list. So to us, the market is saying, well, the Department of Education funds community colleges, they fund universities, they fund vocational schools, and you're supposed to work with all of them right there. When the presumption is, well, why don't you work with community colleges? That's a heck of a mixed message, because they're all funded by U.S. Department of Education. They're all regulated by U.S. Department of Education. So who are we? I mean, I hear those things, but then that's not what we get from the government. The government funds all these entities. I get employers coming to me and they say, I want to work with that voc ed school. Well, what about the community college? I want to work with that voc ed school. I'm the customer. Or I want to work with this proprietary school. We got proprietary schools giving scholarships now because we were on them about paying so much to try to meet our tuition amount. So the market has adjusted. So then for us, the question is, who says we're supposed to work with community colleges only? You know, I got universities now doing non-credit based stuff. So I got 4 entities competing. And so what do I say? Well, I think you're the one I should work with. Well, but we're funded by the same group. We're regulated. You know, then I got people complaining, filing grievances with the state because you didn't work with me versus them. So I think there needs to be an alignment at the federal level also in that regard.
Right. Yeah, fair enough. But fair enough. And that's, this is like couple counseling, right? Like you hear it from both sides, and like everybody's complaints or concerns are sort of legit.
And there are 10 divorce lawyers out there at the same time. Waiting for you to leave.
I'm trying to get you guys back together. That's what. So that's fair enough. The competing claims, but does Steve's vision? I mean, I'm trying to play troublemaker here, right? Does Steve's vision strike you as a little too close? Like that idea that we're going to share the data, we're going to share the metrics, we're going to really be, does that make you claustrophobic?
Are we supposed to be an honest broker?
Yeah.
I'm just asking the question. I'm told we're supposed to be an honest broker. We don't do training by design. We're supposed to have all these assessment systems. We're supposed to have all these ETPL lists so that the clients and everybody can make their best informed decision. So if clients come in and say, based upon everything I know and based upon the ETPL list, and I got 15 clients and 10 of them want to say they want to go to a vocational or proprietary school, am I supposed to say, no, you must go to the community college, right? And then I get hit by them. And then what happens when they don't graduate or they don't get a job in the area? I went where you told me to go, and it didn't happen the way you told me it would be. Yeah. Then I got a complaint, and so I'm just saying there are mixed hidden signals, and the signal from the state and the signal from the feds and the signal from everybody else doesn't always line up.
Yeah, fair enough. So Steve, what do you think about that? So you do kind of want and I'm putting words in your mouth a little bit, turning it into a stereotype, but you do want a kind of privileged relationship as the community college. And what about what about Clyde's kind of dilemma there, where he's got these various competing, potential horses to ride, so to speak. And, in Northern Virginia, you're probably the best, but there's a lot of places where the community college is still all focused on transfer and, associate degrees that are meaningless in the labor market, and they aren't maybe the best partner, and maybe that, that proprietary school is better.
Well, let me first start out the vision of this council that you referred to, like you'd set up between the community college and workforce, but I don't think it's limited to those two members. So if there's a 4-year partner, if there's other strong schools, I think that needs to be part of the system you build. Because I think community colleges see themselves sort of, at least some community colleges, I won't speak for all of them, see themselves a little different than just a training provider. And that's where the rub begins. Yes, we do training, but then we do all this other stuff because often we are sort of on the economic development scale. We're helping with our economic development partners. We're doing a K-12 outreach and dual enrollment. We're doing all sorts of things that are not just about the basic training, because I've got 2 workforce boards in my area. One, I think, because I know they're on the call, one would probably see us more as a strategic partner. They're the smaller of the 2. The other one is the bigger one, and they see us as just one of like a dozen training providers.
Yeah.
But on the non-credit side, I've got a $10 million book of business, and WIOA gives me less than $100,000 a year. So it's not even on my radar as something I care about from that, like, oh, I want more of that, because they spend less. They spend like about $1.5 million a year on training.
Right.
Even if I got all of it, it's less than 10% of my budget. So it's not really, but from a strategic standpoint, how do we come together to grow the economy? How do we really, as a region, close the skill gap? I think if you focus on the big picture things, it becomes less turf battle, because it's not chasing dollars, it's chasing the goal. The goal is to make sure businesses have the talent in these high demand areas. And trust me, we do not do everything well. There are certain things we try to do well, and there's other things I know we have to do, but we're not the best. So we often will say, we can't do that workforce board. You're going to have to go to someone else, because I either don't have the money to make that investment to get it up to that standard, or it's just not a strategic direction we want to go because the market's too small.
So, again, you're really talking kind of one, I mean, you've used the word one system. I mean, who's going to be in charge in that one system? Who's going to wear the pants in this family?
Well, I don't think, I mean, that's when you get the turf battles. Like, I want to be in charge. I want to be the executive director. I think you can build something. Beings, right? Yeah, we like to be in charge. And we're in DC right now, so of course we all love to be in charge. I think the issue is you have to look at, because I think there was something that chat about, would community colleges then be subject to the same performance metrics? I don't think, if you subjugate us to those, I think it would change the dynamic of what we do. I think we have to do what we have to do because our funding is different, and we have to make sure we meet those metrics. But as a system, again, the customer doesn't need to see all that behind the curtain. How do we make sure the customer comes in, gets the correct data about where the jobs are, the correct advising that says, based on your skills and background, you have the best shot of getting the wages you're looking for in the shortest amount of time in these 3 fields. And here's the training providers that do it, and give them the data.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're not producing people that get jobs, then we shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
I'm fine getting kicked out. In fact, I've taken myself off the ETPL list on certain classes because I wasn't happy with the results we were getting, even though the board wanted us to stay. So I think it's not really about who's in charge. It's about the brand, it's about awareness, and it's about making sure that we're working together to get the student or the client to the finish line, which is a job that meets employer needs.
Yeah. Okay, so I think you do have sort of different visions, and I think you both explain them well. I think you have a vision kind of what we'll, for want of a better word, call sort of one system, and Clyde is still sort of wants to be the guy playing between the 4 potential vendors. But that's, fair enough. That's good. We wanted 2 different visions in a way. Let's talk about how can we agree on like what should happen in policy and what should happen in incremental steps. Well, before we do so, Steve, so you're going to be willing, as community college guy, you're going to be willing to accept when I, the president, say that you're going to have WIOA metrics, or the Senate, you're going to have WIOA metrics applied to you. You're going to take that?
Yeah, I'll take some of it. I mean, if
there's no sum, there's 6 metrics.
Well, I think we have to decide what part of the college. We're a $300 million organization. We're not talking about that you take 100,000 money and now every student is subject to those. So I think for those metrics and the dollars you take, yes, they should get gainful employment. We should be able to report wage gains, which we're already doing a little in Virginia because of our Fast Forward program that you're familiar with, where we get more money actually coming into our college than I think across the state we get through WIOA in direct training dollars. $15 million a year that's going directly to credential-based training that we are on the hook to show employment, wage gain, and credential attainment. So we don't get paid as the community college unless that student successfully passes and receives the credential. So I'd love to see that on the credit side, but my colleagues would probably disagree with me on that.
Okay, but that's fair enough, fair enough. So if you're gonna get workforce system dollars, so that's that part of the college subject to WIOA metrics. So Clyde, he's kind of bringing a lot to the table. He's going to provide the data for you. He's willing to go in the room with the employers. He's willing to take the WIOA metrics.
And I'll pay for the box lunch with the employers. There you go. Are you on board, Clyde?
Does this not yet sound like worth making him the sort of the partner? And he's willing to have other partners in the room. Does this not yet sound tempting?
One big issue, and I think it is, who is our target market in terms of the job seeker side? And the target market from the job seeker side is the economically disadvantaged poor person, the SNAP recipient, the TANF recipient, the laid off worker, people who are unemployed. Reverse, take a look at then who is the predominant customer of the community college system. And many, it is incumbent workers who are retraining. It is persons who are engaged in professional development. It is all these persons. And in fact, in some places, the student body of the poor, the economically disadvantaged, et cetera, might not even be 25% of the student body.
Yeah.
Why else is it that Pell Grant money every year is unspent? If we are servicing the poor, and I understand why the workforce system was created under WDR, laid off workers, the poor, the economically disadvantaged, that's been our target market. And in fact, only recently has incumbent worker and those types been pushed even more. So I think that is a big distinction between the two.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, I think the target population is merging more as more and more community colleges think that mid-career adults are their role. But you're right, that TANF, SNAP, person is probably, they're not always that many of them at the community college. So let's go to a next question, and then we'll pretty soon open it up.
Tamar, can I just address that, because
please.
Clyde is right. I mean, Nova, before our Fast Forward program, none of our non-credit training had any financial aid in Virginia. So unless you were an incumbent worker, or at least someone working to pay $3,000 or $4,000 for a class, you didn't really get the opportunity to take them. With Fast Forward now, it basically buys down the cost of these programs by 2/3. And if you are economically disadvantaged, you can get 80% subsidy for that first third. So you could get a $3,000 class for $60. So it's very affordable. What we realized very quickly, which to your point is, that was 99% of our workforce folks coming into our system were working, or had a degree, or had some prior work experience. They were not the traditional SNAP, TANF recipient who, might need additional wraparound services. So we struggled the first year or two to really provide services, and how we even set up these classes, because there was a lot of assumption there that these people knew how the bureaucracy of higher education worked, and how to do tests and how to study. And now we've had to sort of revamp everything. Now, not every college is the same, but some states have always had a history of working and getting financial aid for their non-credit. So there are colleges that are very good at this.
And even in Fast Forward, I mean, are you serving really like SNAP, TANF, like that population?
We are.
Yeah, okay.
And we at Nova, we've also had a SNAP ET grant for the past several years too. So we were serving that population. So we've learned a lot in the last few years, but I'd say if we were having this conversation 4 years ago, we had no experience on the non-credit side with that population.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so let's see if we can agree on a few things that government should do. And let's talk maybe federal government and state government. And I'll start, because I'll throw, and then I do want to get to the audience, and I see chat coming in, so I'm trusting Amber's gonna, but I can't do two things at once. So I'm trusting Amber's gonna help me sift what people are adding. I can't read and talk at the same time. We had a recommendation in our report, and Steve was actually part of the group that produced this report. We said that the 15% governor is, part of the formula, that 15% administrative fund or whatever the governor gets every year as part of his WIOA spending, that should be contingent on the governor taking steps to bring the two sides closer together. So what do you think about that, Clyde? Would you have a mutiny if that happened?
Only if there was a committee that worked with them, comprised of workforce board members and community college system people together to help make that decision.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think that would be good if there was that type of governance structure in place.
If you had representation on the deciding body, so to speak.
Yes, and comprised of the board chair and a workforce directors as well, including community college persons like Steve and the chancellor, the board chairperson, somebody like that. I think that would be both, for the technical and the policy side of it.
Yeah, got it. Okay. So Steve, you're down with that because you signed on to that, right?
Yeah. Yep.
We had this report that people
Yeah.
had to sign, and this was one of the recommendations that some people weren't that comfortable with. So, okay, so now we've got that. Now we've got a federal incentive. We're living in a universe where we've got a federal incentive for the governors to do better at bringing together braiding. What actual, can we agree on some reforms that the governor should take? Let's pretend we're all in the same state. Clyde, are you in KCMO or KCK?
I'm in KCMO, and it's the 5 regions on KCMO, and we service urban, rural, and suburban populations. So our region is 2,700 square miles.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Okay. So let's pretend we're in Missouri just for fun. It's more fun than Virginia.
Depends on what day.
So, you know, the federal mandate told me, I'm the governor, federal mandate told me I'm not going to get my 15% unless I can bring you guys together and get some real cooperation. So what's the first step? You're the council.
I think the first step is to look at how can we better engage credit-based courses in just-in-time training for industry demand. That would be the first step that I would do, because I don't think it needs to be stuck over here in the non-credit box. It needs to be both credit and non-credit, because that way we can draw down Pell Grant money.
Yeah, I'd rather fix Pell and keep the flexibility of the non-credit side, but okay.
Right. Well, I think if we fix it and fix it, then that would be good. I don't do that. I think the issue is more flexibility from the college side, because right now their business model would not have any incentive to a business model that they had to crater teachers and that type of thing because of the way we're doing it.
But it's not the degree that matters to you, it's the funding.
Yes, because I think with the funding, you'll get the degrees and you get the certifications. The funding is there.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to bring, so that's your first fix. Steve, what's your first fix? How do you think about that? And what do you, as the dean of the non-credit side, maybe you don't like that so much, but what do you think about Clyde's idea, and what's your best idea for me as governor?
Yeah, I think, you know, especially for the population we're talking about, is usually it's trying to get them these stackable opportunities. The degree is sometimes too far a lift. I mean, even for some people, you know, straight out of high school, it's like, I'm not ready to commit the next 2 to 4 years to go to school full time. So this idea of giving people, sort of deconstructing the bachelor's degree and working backwards to say, listen, what can we give people to, the minimum to get them to work to a level that we know we have employers in our community that will hire them. Because up until recently, we had such low unemployment, employers were a little more cooperative of sort of lowering the bar on what used to be, you know, the bachelor's degree or the associate degree, to say, listen, maybe that isn't as important as you can do the actual task and have the skills and competencies. So we need to sort of, the non-credit often is good at deconstructing it and offering some of these credentials. The trick is not to make it lead nowhere. And that's the part that's a little more confusing, because not only do you have to have your non-credit credentials lead eventually to an associate degree at your own institution, but then how, if that student wants to keep going towards a bachelor's degree, can they get that prior learning credit baked in? And that takes a lot more negotiation, but I think it needs to come down from the governor all the way through the legislature. That's a mandate. Don't build something that puts people on dead end paths.
Yeah.
That's the problem with our whole system, is that we like to train people and they learn a skill and then it's like, oh, that doesn't count. You have to do it over when you get to the associate level. And then, oops, you have to do it over again. And that's a problem, both not just from a money issue, from a time standpoint for many of these individuals we're trying to help.
Yeah, I heard a great, somebody put it really well in a conversation I had the other day. Why can't we get to the point where credit and non-credit are not alternatives? They're just, you know, steps on a single continuum.
Yep.
You know, and if that was true, I think it would be easier for Clyde to partner with you. So that's what community colleges have to get their house in order to be better partners for the workforce system. Okay,
and often that is often the problem. Not, we can give prior learning credit for anything. I mean, we could go out tomorrow and say every workforce program in non-credit is now worth something at the college. The trick is, if you want them to go on to a bachelor's degree, you have to get their buy-in sort of up front. And that usually, unless you have a strong leader in the state, it often requires personal relationships between the community college and the senior institution to really make sure that happens. And sometimes you get a college president at the university level that's really passionate about that. Others, they're saying, oh, no, they have to really learn it from our instructors, which is not the best way to do it.
Well, strong leadership or legislation. Those states that, you know, but okay, we can get sidetracked on fixing community colleges here. So let's go back to what we're going to do to bring you guys together. Can we get over like everybody doing their own data or nobody doing the data? Like, how should we decide, you know, which of the entities, or should it be some shared unit, or like who's going to do that? That's expensive, hard work. I'm the taxpayer. I'm paying for it twice. That's crazy. Like I have 2 subscriptions to Burning Glass and MC, and
No,
you know,
I think
2
you have
full-time
one.
people.
You put it somewhere. It could be, like I said, it could be at a chamber, it could be at a nonprofit, it could be at the community college. I think it's really who can do it, who can fund it, and then, you know, you can sort of parcel it out and say, you know, Clyde, you know, can you pay $10,000 a year to get access to all this that helps us buy down the cost of hiring all these people? But it needs to reside somewhere.
What do you think about that, Clyde?
I think that because the unemployment insurance system does a whole lot of data-driven stuff based upon the performance standard metrics, I think we should build upon that because that gives us a whole lot of real-time data based on the market. And then you add on top of that system the stuff like Steve is doing, where you then take data analytics and then take it even further. So I would say the infrastructure for that presently exists within the workforce system, just because of the fact that it's all tied to the UI data that people presently resolve. So that's just that would just be my since they're funding out labor market, LMI, all that stuff. They're funding a ton of that stuff to the UI system. I think we should build upon that.
I mean, again, I just keep coming back to the duplicative thing is so crazy. It's so crazy that you're over here with one big pile of data and Steve's over there with another big pile of data, and you can't get together to paint one.
Well, Steve is an entrepreneurial leader, so he decided to fund that. What I'm saying is on the UI side, it is mandated.
You have it. No, I get it.
Build on the regulatory framework that's required to do it.
Yeah, and Tamar, Clyde's right. I mean, every state gets a lot of money to do the UI system, and they're using their Wagner-Pfizer money. But what you have to realize, every state does it somewhat different. Some states drill down to give you very regional data in a format that is very useful. Some states just kind of put out statewide data, and they're like, well, you have access to the data sets. You can do what you want locally with those. And that's what we were kind of facing a little in North Carolina at the time when we first set that shop up, is the statewide data didn't really reflect what Charlotte had, and it didn't get presented in a way that our clients or our K-12 students that we were trying to really educate on sort of where were the jobs in Charlotte, it just didn't work for them. So that's why we made that investment. And same in Northern Virginia, we just didn't get that sort of data. It exists, but not in the same format.
And the government could use 15% money to do that through the workforce system. And then Steve would have to spend that money. He could spend it on something more like council or something like that. I mean, I think the key is the good data that's relevant, up to date, and that we all publish the same way he does at his institution.
I'm going to add a wrench to that issue. So I have a friend at one of the federal banks. They're not even using government data anymore. They're using like credit card use in COVID, credit card usage and cell phone data and buying data from like QuickBooks about HR function. I mean, the world is about to change about what data we use to figure out the labor market. And, you know, we're going to be challenged for this. Let's have one more idea about what I as governor am going to do to bring you guys together. We're gonna mandate. Well, I'm not gonna capture them all. We've had a few on the table. Is there one more that I, as governor, can do to kind of help you get to the table?
Better align, help promote better alignment of the Pell Grant system so that colleges can better use that to do more short-term credentialing, to service more economically disadvantaged groups, to these target populations, which we all know just from the equity standpoint, that we got to do a better job of serving those populations. So why don't, as a part of an equity initiative, reaching those hard to serve populations, as a part of that, use the 15% to create better system sharing across and to help do Pell Grant reform so that Steve and the colleges have more resources to service the economically disadvantaged without dipping into their state reserve funds. And I think that would create some synergy between both of us, and we could add on top of that.
So much comes back to that Pell reform. What do you like, Clyde, in your state? They have the governance at the state level is now education and workforce together. What do you think about that?
Well, I think they have it separated, which is good, because you got the regulatory higher education board up here, the workforce system piece is over here, because we don't want to turn into education. And I think that is very, very important. The workforce system is on the ground, is nimble, agile, and it has to stay that way. We don't need to become a part of the education bureaucracy and all the regulatory aspects. I mean, I don't envy, I mean, there's a regulatory component to that that is very intense. We don't need that.
You don't want
We need to be
iPads?
a part.
You don't want iPads
No.
reporting? Oh, come on. It's so much fun.
No. I've seen that. I don't, my hair would be white if I had all that. But we would want to be on the side, but we don't want to be them. And I think you have to maintain some semblance. We're on the ground, we're nimble and agile. We were dedicated to support these really nimble students that we got to work with to make them a part of the system. But give no mind, there is a distinct need for higher education as we see it, and a need for the workforce system as we saw it. And they were designed with very distinct purposes in mind. One is market driven, based on the need of the unemployed. The other one is based on us having a continuous system of higher education to make our whole populace more competitive nationally to get more economic drive growth in our country.
Okay, Steve, you want to add one more idea for me as governor, and then we'll get to,
Yeah.
I know Amber's been sending me questions, and I've been studiously ignoring them.
Yeah, just two things. I build on Clyde's comment. I agree the system needs to remain separate, but I wish education could learn from workforce to be a little more nimble, because we still graduate a lot of people in degrees that have little market value and it's hard because, a lot of the data will show, well, over a person's 40-year life with a degree, they're better off. But in the short term, I still see a lot of kids that borrowed a lot of money at Starbucks serving me coffee. And they end up back at Nova sometimes getting additional certificates in IT and other things that then get them that first job, but they graduate not really prepared for what the actual skills the job market needs. And it's sort of sad that you'd have to then go back to community college to get additional skills when you left laden with debt, spent 4+ years getting that degree, and then you can't get hired. So there's a disconnect there that I think, I think everything's workforce, just, that everything's big W workforce, because at the end of the day, even with a degree, your job, because I've got 3 boys, is to get a job. I mean, you don't want to come back home and live in my basement.
Yeah,
So
of course.
that's the key.
There's one system I won't name that says, the system says our role is to educate global citizens. And one of my friends who works there says, there's not a single person on my campus who came here to learn how to be a global citizen.
Yeah.
They're here for.
And I guess if you would have, because we've had some faculty, I've had some very interesting conversations that it's about improving citizenship. It's like, if the government were paying the full rack rate and that's one of our goals, fine. But when someone's borrowing money to get a job and have to pay that loan back, I think we owe it to them to make sure they are job ready. Okay. The other thing I'd say is making sure, I think we all are challenged both at the workforce level and at the community college level, is sometimes getting the business leaders to the table, both through our advisory boards, our board of directors, and having a governor push that. I mean, you get a board of visitors or board of regents, it's prestigious to sit on those, where there's like competition to say, oh, I want to be on that board. You don't sometimes find that with workforce boards and community college boards. So I think getting the prestige level up so that the people want to be on these boards, who are key decision makers in corporations that would help us make better decisions and better investments in future programs, is key. So I think it's not something you legislate, but it's something that I think a governor and others can take up the mantle, saying, listen, we need the best and brightest at the table with these groups.
Okay, so this is great. Very rich conversation. I'm not totally sure what I'm supposed to do as governor, but I'll I'll read over the transcript and maybe I'll figure it out. Now, let's see. Now, how am I going to figure out what these questions are? Amber, I guess I'm going to work back. Well, let's go here. So here's a question this is a question from Amber, but I guess I'm trusting she's getting it from people in the audience. What might performance measures look like in a blended system? So see, Amber's going pretty far, or whoever this person in the audience is. We're talking about a blended system that braids community college and their expertise with workforce boards and their expertise. And that's, kind of my vision too. Like, you guys are, Clyde, at least you're sort of still in, we're really two systems and we have a lot of things we can do better. But this person has got a blended system that braids the two. And what are the performance measures? So do you want to Steve, you want to start weighing in on that?
Yeah, I think one, completion, which, fast forward is, we don't get paid unless this person both completes the class and successfully passes the certification exam. which is a high bar. Because I mean, right now, community college overall 5-year completion rates are pretty low. You know, and again, people come to community college to take a class, then they never wanted to get a degree, but they end up on performance metrics. But even if you look at the 4-year, you're talking, 60% completion in 6 years. I mean, you have that group out there that's some college. They don't have really anything that they can put on a resume that says I've completed a credential or degree, but I have some college. But I still got the debt probably that I'm carrying with that. So I think the system as a whole, completion, and something we don't really measure is we never really pare down. We try, but we really don't pare down both the college's catalog or the ETPL list we need to be much more dynamic to make sure that they are in demand, that they lead somewhere that leads to a good paying job. Because right now you have a lot of politicians talk about early childhood. It's in demand as a parent that needs to put their kids in daycare, but it doesn't pay much. And if you're trying to get someone out of poverty, pushing them into a early childhood program to work in daycare is not going to get them out of poverty. But we're not really honest about that. We just kind of say, oh, that's a great thing. You love kids. You should go into this program. And I think we need to be much more transparent with the outcomes of the type of wages and advising people correctly. And we don't do advising real well. So I think the metric is about completion, degree attainment, and making sure the job outcome. I think both systems need to make sure we know the wages of people from a demographic standpoint too, so that we don't have some systems pushing people in and driving people into jobs that really it's not in their best interest.
Yeah, so you're sort of heading toward WIOA metrics, but WIOA metrics don't have completion, do they?
Good question.
They do have completion, yes.
They do? Okay.
We have
so
to
you're
have
heading toward,
completion.
so you're kind of buying into completion to WIOA metrics. Clyde, do you want to weigh in this? We'll go to.
Yeah, I think number one is if we both had the same metrics, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Yeah.
We have a placement rate. We have a placement rate requirement. We have a retention rate requirement. We got a training related placement requirement. So if the colleges and WIOA had the same metrics, we wouldn't be having this conversation because those metrics would drive us together.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the first thing we're gonna do when I'm the governor, when I'm the queen, when you're the king. This will be the first thing we do. We'll fix Pell, and then we'll give you common metrics. Then we'll be.
And Tamar, I'll add. I think this is where, sometimes community colleges either fall down or it's like, here's my catalog, Clyde, put it on your ETPL list, as opposed to what are we both trying to solve here? Yeah. And build something that's unique. Say, hey, we're going to build 3 new programs that lead to jobs and meet your metrics.
Yeah.
And if we're going to service these hard to serve groups, community college, you got to have a very strong counseling component inside your college to make sure those students complete the courses.
Yeah.
So that it doesn't all completely fall upon the workforce system staff who are already this big anyway.
Well, so that's a good question. Who really should be doing? I mean, that's a really important question, right? Because I mean, every time I have conversations with students, that's the big thing. Like, I got lost at community college, or I got lost in the workforce system. That drift, that like, I don't know where to go. Who should, but people need a lot of things. I mean, they need those assessments that you're going to do when they first get there, Clyde, presumably. Then they need help getting through. Which of you is supposed to be doing this? Is this a
well, here's the deal. The performance standards of retention rate is built into the WIOA system. If we don't meet our retention rates, we get hit. So it's built into our system. So if we have to do it regardless, it has to be done, because we won't hit our performance metrics and we'll be subject to sanction if we don't hit our retention and placement rates.
Who's better at it? Who's got the comparative advantage? I mean, that's what I would ask in every case. Like, and maybe it is different in every region, but who's got the comparative advantage?
I don't think the colleges, it's based on the college budget, but they don't have money to hire a whole bunch of additional counselors.
No.
So
who do you think should do this?
I think if you're trying to be the fair and honest broker, I think for the WIOA client coming in, they need to talk to someone who's sort of not. My advisors are going to tell you our programs are the best. That's probably the inherent bias that they'll have coming in, as opposed to Clyde. Their people say, "What do you want? What are your skills?" Ask the right questions, and then make the right fit based on different programs.
So it really should. But Clyde, I think he's saying you should do it, and Clyde, I think he's saying you should do it. Steve, Clyde, we're
not funded to do it right now. That's the challenge. I think the issue is we need more money.
We have to do it. We have to do it because Steve and them, if we don't do it, we get hit.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
period.
But do you want to do it? Are you the best?
No, I think we should do it. I think we have
Yeah.
to have a connection to the people because we're on the ground
Yeah,
in,
yeah,
in these neighborhoods where we're supposed to be working with
Yeah.
our partners. Remember, we're lined up with the Family Services Department, the Social Services Department, the VR department.
yeah.
This partnership, which is what the WIB is supposed to be, a partnership of all these agencies working together for the common good. So it should fall on the system,
But
which
you know,
is
in a way,
just
it has
bigger
to
than
be both,
DOL.
Yeah.
right? Because to get them through the college, once they get to the college, helping them
Yeah.
navigate to choose the college
Right.
is one
Yeah.
thing. But then to get through the college, it might not be
Yeah.
that the workforce system are the best people. So you both need more money for that.
Well,
Yeah.
think about this. If you have a true advisor that's sort of counseling them on what's the right program, once they're in the program, if we're getting paid on performance at that point, I might want to build in a success coach
Yeah.
along the way to ensure they get to the finish line.
Yeah.
So there might
And
be
remember,
two
under
people
the
involved.
WIOA, and just like Steve was saying, under the WIOA system, we have the family, the TANF agencies, the community action agencies, the VR agencies. They're all part of this system of support through the WIOA system. That case managers is a part of it. It does not include everybody. For example, that Steve has might be a continuing ed person, because incumbent workers have a problem completing too. So, but we're trying to get skilled workers in our country to complete globally. We can't afford to leave anybody on the bench. Period.
Right, exactly.
So
Yep.
yeah, so for Steve to do his students, he needs to have a counseling for capacity with them. Period. Wherever they come from. For us to have WIOA, the workforce system, we have to have one. And I think they are still complementary. They're not duplicative.
Yeah,
There's only so much you can do.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the
I mean, in a
goal. Let's
perfect
build
world-
something that's complementary, not duplicative.
Well, in a perfect world too, I think I'd love to see more money, rather than these arbitrary percentages that state legislators like to put on how much training dollars have to go. I'd love to see, again, there's a lot of training dollars. If we get short-term Pell, there'd be no shortage of training dollars. Then the workforce system could focus on the advising and helping get them to the finish line. But instead, they're under-resourced for the advisors because they have to put a certain percent into training. But if we get short-term Pell or other state resources to braid that funding, it's less about the training paying for it. It's more about making sure it's the right training and the person is advised correctly.
God, it all comes back to that short-term Pell.
And then the other reason is what happens, why does Pell not even pay most of the coursework? Because people got to split Pell between living expenses and tuition support. And what happens to those poor students? They go get a loan because they had to use Pell to eat. You know, I mean, that's part of the challenge that systematically exists.
Yeah. No, fair enough. So here's an interesting question. Let's see, where was that question I liked? Oh, so Tracy says, DOL, DOE put out funding that required cooperation between community college and workforce development boards. Is anybody pursuing that? And can federal funding help to bring us into a room to start figuring this out? Well, that's sort of what my 15% to the governor was, but this would be another stream where it goes right to you guys if you can cooperate. Is anybody, are you, either of you, or does any, and if just other people in the audience, this would be a time to come in. Is somebody doing something real interesting here?
The state in our area coordinated at the state level to do it, but it didn't trickle down to the locals.
Yeah, I thought that your state was doing it. That's why I was sort of surprised.
No, they applied for it, but the funding piece, it didn't come through the system.
And you didn't get the money.
Held up. No,
Yeah.
Didn't happen.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Questions. I feel like some of these questions have been answered. This is a question for Steve. I feel like you sort of have answered this, but I'll put it to you anyway. Do community colleges want to take on the regulatory burden that boards live with, as well as live inside of, as well as the performance measures? So not just the metrics, but the regulatory burden. And this question wants to know what actually performance measures do you have now?
Yeah, well, I alluded to some of it. With the funding that we call Fast Forward, we don't get paid unless the student completes and then
You're
passes.
unique.
So
this is very unique in Virginia. This does not happen in most states.
But if you take Fast Forward out of the mix and you look at all of our non-credit offerings, we have very little regulation because we actually are a profit center for the college, meaning we generate our own revenue to pay our staff, our salaries, our faculty, and give 30% back to the college as far as, discretionary revenue. So we don't have a lot of regulation that sits on top of our non-credit offerings. Now you go to the credit side, that is as you all know, when you have credit courses, you have the state higher ed authority that sort of oversees all of that and programs, and we're accredited institution. So we go every 10 years through an accrediting process for the whole college. So there's a lot of regulation that we have to go through. And that's why on average, it takes 2+ years to start a new credit degree program because of all the regulatory red tape to get things started. That's why we're sort of the incubator or the test kitchen for the college. We come up with the new stuff, and often that will lead to degrees down the road when we see there's demand there.
Test kitchen, I love it. Never heard that metaphor, but you know, in a way, yes, there's a huge amount of regulation on the credit side. In some other way, you know, they get those FTEs for the butts and seats, no matter what happens to the people. I mean, you know, I mean, yes and no. It's sort of regulation on the inputs, but not regulation that looks at the outcomes.
And that's probably
that's
why
like
they could not deal with the performance standards either on the credit side. You know, unfortunately, but there's got to be reform over there. There's got to be.
I'm with you, man. I'm totally with you.
There's got to be reform over there.
But I think if you look at some of the WIOA, where we put in training, we don't often send people to degree programs because you have them in your metric pool for, you know, years.
Too long.
Often they're going part-time. So we're really not talking credit. A lot of times it's the non-credit world. If it's credit, it's more of a short-term certificate that might be 6 months or less, but there's questionable market value for some of those because it's usually just a hodgepodge of classes that really were intended to fit as a teaser to get you into the degree eventually. Or if you have a degree, it's coming back and it's adding on to your degree already. They're not really designed.
But I think Steve brings up an interesting question, because the issue shouldn't be market value just to the students. It should be market value to the employers. And if a two-year certificate does not have market value, I contend it should not be being executed. And it was done, and semesters were based on the agricultural economy. For spring, summer, and fall planting seasons. We are no longer an agricultural economy. But why do we still have an agricultural framework that governs our school calendars?
The reason we have daylight savings on Sunday.
I mean, I think that's, again, I mean, that's a good thing. Schools have very strong alumni, have very great people who can promote their aspect. But again, that's a regulatory aspect that needs to be changed because we're in the 21st century.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of what's coming out of this conversation is that a lot does have to happen on the community college side for them to kind of step up as the partner of choice, but then the two sides have to be willing to come into the room. And so there's a lot of things to fix here.
So Tamar, can I frame up a question? Just
please.
And say it out loud rather than write it, because it was too hard to write and really give the context. So Steve, I heard you say that programs like those that promote people into early childhood education were maybe not the value, didn't necessarily have the return on investment that that we might want to see. I'm curious what you guys both think about how we can use a better pathing model that would integrate the boards and the community colleges in a more intentional way to drive job quality in those really critical spaces where right now people are low wage and they really do have challenges around the quality of those jobs. And I'll give you an example to set the stage. So in Pittsburgh, they have developed a model in partnership with their community college and one of their four-year colleges in the region around early childhood education that embeds a registered apprenticeship from the CDA, which is a short-term credential, to an associate's degree, and then to a bachelor's degree. Each one of those is a different registered apprenticeship that's articulated and stacked to the next. And there's been a lot of work around that. The purpose of that is to start to drive wages and improve the job quality and some of the equity indicators around that occupation and help those women, largely, right, mostly Black and brown women, to begin to move up the economic ladder and have a pathway into more leadership positions, et cetera. Because one of the things we know about education is that at the lowest level, we see a lot of less educated, less income levels, and mostly Black and brown women. And then at the upper levels, you see mostly white, oftentimes in administrative roles, men who are making a lot of money. So there's this wall. how do you blend these systems together to help those women move along those pathways?
Good question. Steve, you can start, and then Clyde.
Yeah, I think you always have to start backwards. I mean, we look at the data and see how many jobs we're talking about, because there's a lot of people that have good intentions that develop systems that, like, the top is like a few hundred jobs in a market, and then the bottom is thousands of jobs. And so even if you train people up and you're trying to get into that pathway, what are the odds they're going to get one of those spots? So we tend to look at the data and let it drive a little about where are the actual numbers, and what is the entry point, and what are the next levels, and are those somewhat the same, or are you getting into this sort of pyramid effect? And yes, the CEO, there might only be one, but there's a lot of industries like IT that you can have thousands of entry-level jobs, thousands of next-level jobs, and even at that top tier, there's thousands. So you want to make sure you're building a system that is scalable. Otherwise, it's a great pet project to show people, oh, look, we built a way to move up. But in reality, if you look at the long term, very, very few people make it to that next level or above. So we want to make sure that there's actual room to grow in these jobs. But you're right. I think you build it backwards. It has to be stackable. It has to be a pathway. Otherwise, why get excited about these jobs? Part of our job of getting students in the system is to show them the potential. Because sometimes many of these students don't see their own potential, because they're coming from a background that maybe someone didn't really invest that time to really help them think that a lot of us on this call, probably their parents said, you can do anything when you grow up. It used to be, you could be president of the United States, and it was a good thing. But now anyone can be president of the United States. But there's a lot of people in our society that don't think they can go up that ladder. And I think you got to make sure you're building something that doesn't lead to that false expectation. They get caught in that lower rung and never make it to that next level.
Clyde, that's interesting, really interesting answer. I think let's go to, maybe we don't have a question from an audience. Clyde, you weigh in on this if you want. If we don't have a question from an audience, I'm going to ask one more, and then we'll give people back the time. So last chance, audience, going once, going twice. Clyde.
Okay, yeah, I think the child care imperative, though, is beyond the workforce board. It is an economic development imperative. The child care is part of the three-legged stool. Training, childcare, and transportation, and increasingly housing is a major part of our workforce strategy, because without it, we don't get retention. And so the one thing that we need to be sure of is that it is part of a public policy discussion, because childcare, I heard some people up in DC, for example, say childcare was running $3,000 a month. Who can pay for that? Who can pay for, if you're a SNAP recipient, pay $600 a month when you're only bringing home $15 an hour? It's impossible, but we got to have it, because our unemployment rate, we're talking about unemployment rates in Missouri, dropped like 4.9%, they recorded one. But 80,000 people have dropped out of the labor market due to childcare. 40% of our childcare slots have been dissolved during this whole issue of the pandemic. So that's a question that we got to resolve from a public policy standpoint, because those folks need to make more. The same way we need to pay CNAs more. We had to do it through an apprenticeship program, because you got to have CNAs to take care of the elderly in these managed care settings. So some of this, we got to bring the economic development folks that Steve would sit on our boards to say, listen, as a part of a strategy, this beyond workforce training, this is, as a society system, we got to pay these folks more. And I think that's part of what can happen through this partnership also, right? Because some people are not going to pursue something, they're going to go broke in, period. Yeah. And then that only aggravates the problem. Yeah. And among who? The poor, right? And the ones who are single parent families, where in our region, 6 out of every 10 families are led by a single head of household, be it male or female. And that just can't sustain itself if we don't have the child care available, period.
Yeah. No, so this is great. I mean, what I really like about this is we've sort of brought the conversation at the end back to the people we're trying to serve. I'm going to ask one last question about the people we're trying to serve, and then we'll give people back their time. This has been a great, rich conversation. We've hardly used the word COVID, and we've hardly used the phrase future of work. And what they both point toward to me is dislocated workers. When I am a student, you guys are on the ground doing practical stuff. I read the literature. I mean, it would make you like weep to read the literature around dislocated workers. I mean, there's nobody who's ever found a program that like really helps. or helps enough, gets people back to like their wages. So like, what should we do? Like, and how can you guys cooperate to help those dislocated workers? What's the plan for I just lost my job. I worked for 20 years at the Pillsbury plant and now I'm out. I used to make 25 bucks and where are you going to put me? And I don't know how to do computer CNC. Like, where are you going to put me? What are you going to do?
It's tricky, but I think you're right. I think it's almost like the heart transplant. Those first few hours are critical. The longer someone stays unemployed and dislocated, their chances of getting back to that wages increases exponentially. So we've got to do something quickly. And the pandemic's been sort of a tough one because people were both advised during the layoff to stay home, and that, oh, you heard on the news that, we hope this is going to be that V recovery and everything will return to normal. So people, I think, waited. And even if you were laid off in April or May, you're kind of waiting for that. It's going to get back. It's going to come back. And now we're hearing the K that some people are going to come back and other jobs are gone for good. But it's really, I think, been the advising piece. And that's the critical piece that Clyde needs to get in there, his team, to like get these people to figure out where their skill sets are and how they can make that transition. Because, the Pillsbury plant might not come back, but maybe the skills they had are applicable to a different industry. And I think you're seeing more of that. In the old days, if you were in hospitality, you're going to die in hospitality because people just didn't jump industries as much. But the cross intersection of IT and other skills like project management is applicable in every industry, and it's helping them figure out how they fit in other sectors that might be growing. And there are sectors growing right now.
Yeah. Clyde, you got some
ideas?
Yeah,
and I think I'll agree with Steve. I think the other thing that we have to put back into our system, period, is something that we used to call rapid response. And I think under JTPA, when I was state workforce director in Texas, rapid response was huge because of all the gas and all the stuff that was going down. We have to rapidly respond to these laid off workers. We can't let them sit stale. So we have to immediately engage them, whether it's virtually through a Zoom interview, whether it is through some type of portal, which I think the COVID has really helped us expand our virtual capabilities, which I think people have gotten accustomed to. So we must use a combination of those things. Maybe you can't be talking with them right time with a face-to-face, but give a Zoom and say, hey, we're here to help you. Here's how we can do it. I think we got to put rapid response back into our vernacular as a system. I think we've got to gotten away from that. And we got to all understand that anybody's time out of a job is too much time. Yeah. We need them engaged as back as much for themselves, for their family, because I can tell you, I've seen so much domestic abuse, so much, all this stuff that's really become elevated. We become much more aware of mental health issues because of lack of work or being out of work. That is a huge, huge issue. And many of the things that we compounded, I don't think people fully understood that until now, which means we got to be much more intensively engaged with our career counseling and our support, where many people don't have that backup because they are single-headed. They're only adult in the house. Right. They can't talk to their kid about, how I feel because I've lost the job and I don't know how to feed you. That has to be systems like us working together with our one-stop partners to get that done. And I think we have to really re-engage. I think we kind of lost that. I think we kind of lost everything. We need to get that just as okay, but for all these persons.
Yeah. Great. So I think we could go on talking all day. This is such an interesting conversation. I think, again, we're giving people back 8 minutes. It's not very much, but thank you both. Super interesting conversation. I learned a ton, and thank you to MUS for hosting.
Thank you all. And Tamar, thank you. Great job moderating the conversation and kind of.
Tamar, you need your own show, Tamar. You need to be Johnny.
I love my own show.
Tamar Carson tonight.
Let's find a funder. If you can find me a funder, I would love to do it.
I would watch that on a regular. Just as a few closing notes here then, want to thank all of the folks who joined us today, and super grateful for your participation here. We usually do have a much more chatty group of folks, but it's heading into daylight savings time, Steve. I'll let it that.
And OJT the other day. That was a competing one yesterday.
Yes, yesterday's OJT thing was competing. Yep. Thank you very much. There will be a survey that will come out. Please do fill out the survey. It's important for us to know what you liked, what you wish you would have had more of, what you could have done less with. And it will inform how we do these going forward. And this video will be posted up on our YouTube channel. And so if you wanted to share it with others, that would be the place to go and get it from. So again, thank you all to our panelists for the great conversation, and to our attendees for joining us here. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Bye, everyone.